Well, hey YouTube, this is my in-scale layout that I decided to build starting back in January of 2021. It was a bit of my COVID project. It's 72 by 30 inches, so pretty small, so it could go in my upstairs office. But here you can see it's pretty much just the bare bones of how I wanted to try to form the layout as I went. And then eventually I decided to go ahead and build kind of the actual frame, put down some foam so I could give it a little bit more depth as it continued to unfold. Because again, what I really wanted to do was something that was going to be a little bit more heirloom, like I could pass it down to grandkids or whatever else. And so I just started doing a lot of research. I'd never done anything like this before. And this sort of evolved over the course of time. I'll have some more live footage of it. But you're kind of getting a sense of just the way I was initially kind of understanding things, hoping to see things come together. Kind of a different angle here. But the concept was kind of initially just this figure eight, kind of a single thing, but I was going to put it on DCC, and you'll see later why I did this. Some people would say, why bother? But I actually felt that there was some space for it, and so started kind of putting it together. Eventually got the risers, giving it some depth and that kind of thing. You can see I wanted to have various tunnels and just getting a feel for it. So this is where it finally was like testing at this point. And so I was just making sure that everything is running right. You see that crossover in the middle. Eventually that's going to get pulled. You're going to see the layout change a little bit here as time goes on. But you know, because I'd never done anything like this before, had never really worked with in-scale or anything like that, everything was trial and error, right? I was going on YouTube, looking at videos, watching things, figuring out how to wire things, figuring out what does and doesn't work, just as far as like polarity and that kind of thing, and just kind of stitched it together as we went, learned how to work with foam. That was a lot of trial and error as well. And then there was just times where the track was maybe too tight. I'd have to change a turn. Something just wasn't aligning or whatever else. But for me at this point, this was probably a month into the project. I was really starting to get a sense of how everything kind of comes together in a project of this nature. And also I was getting a sense of like how I'll put the town in, that kind of thing. And so things really started to come together. Now, as you can see here, this is where things really kind of jump up a little bit more. And this was a video I shot for YouTube because I had a 3-light signal that I wanted to put in, but Kato doesn't allow you to put this in with DCC. It's only for DC. And so I had to come up with a manual override so I could still get the light to change even though I was running a DCC current through it. And so I had to put a DC pack underneath to power my turnouts and to power that light. But then I could run the track actually on DCC from there. And the reason for that is because I wanted more than one locomotive on the track. Even if I wasn't running it, I wanted the freedom of putting that all kind of on the track as well. And so this was just a little thing. I was explaining the problem. I'll put that video in the notes below. If anybody else wants to try to go ahead and, solve the problem that I did. Kind of by doing this, it kind of changed a little bit what I was hoping to do, and it changed some of the angles that were there in the turns. But this is where really the layout began to come together in a real concrete way. Now, in this next clip, you can see where I decided to finally, jump into kind of plaster. And that was another learning curve, where, how was I going to make it to where those different entry points in the tunnels, were going to be sealed up and look natural and normal and that kind of thing. But at this point, I've started to get really excited about it because for me, even it just seemed like a Frankenstein project. Like I'm like, is this thing ever going to look like a layout? It just looked crazy sloppy, and I just took a lot of faith in all the other videos on YouTube I'd watched of people doing layouts that, hey, these things really do come together, and the more you work with the plaster, the more you understand it. And so, for me, as I continued to work it, I just, kind of understood it more. I got some rock castings so I could add a little bit more texture into some of these crevices and that kind of thing, which was super exciting as well when I could see that happen. But at this point, this is where everything was pretty firmed up and the real vision began to materialize. Started figuring out my town, how I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted it all wired for lighting, so you can see here, went all in on that for sure, and just made sure everything was glued down and had rock formations, that kind of thing. And so, just started to give it a little bit more life at this point. And now here it's really kind of cool to me because, again, this is where I was laying down a lot of foam, a lot of greenery, that kind of thing. And what I was particularly excited about with some of this is the fact that most of the foam I did myself. So I went ahead and went to, like a hobby store, or actually it was like Ben Franklin, and just purchased some chair foam and different colors of paint and a $10 blender from Walmart, and started making different colors and textures and sizes of the foam to put down so that I could do it a little bit more on the cheap. In fact, you'll see I put a lot of trees on the layout by the end, and a lot of that was just homemade trees or using, I never know if it's pronounced lichen or lichen. I think it's lichen. But just bought bags of that from Ben Franklin as well. And just let it kind of, I just started putting stuff down, and kind of doing the glue and alcohol mix and everything else, just taking all the advice I was picking up online. Same with the ballasting of the track, was just doing a lot of that kind of thing as well. But it really all began to, again, finally come together. So here's some shots of just at night, me getting a better feel for the lighting and if I liked it, some of the close-ups of everything. And with that, really, I'm going to go ahead and give you this final video that I just shot today that gives a little bit more audio to all of this as well. And this is my finished product. And so after a lot of time, about a year total, a little more than a year, I finally got this thing all put together. And so lit my town. Some people notice there's not a single person in my community. That's sort of by design. I didn't want any people in my community. It's kind of a world that I have a little bit more control over that way. But everything is reminiscent of things here in the Pacific Northwest for me, or things that were just dear to me growing up or whatever else. And so my father-in-law owned a gas station. I put that in. The community here is kind of modeled loosely after a little town called Port Townsend here in the greater kind of Seattle area, Pacific Northwest. Loved baseball as a kid, especially kind of the Sandlot style, so I went with that as well. And then up here in the Northwest, we have a lake called Diablo Lake, which is this color. And so I decided I wanted my lake to be that color as well. Wanted some cascading waterfalls for fun. Never had done a water pour before, and so I did that. Did the Mod Podge kind of cover over the top of that pour to get kind of the ripply effect as well. As a kid, loved fishing, so put a fishing boat here as well. Also here in the Northwest, there's homes that are on hillsides where they cut out a lot of the trees and just have this sloping effect, and so wanted to put that in. Love camping, love kind of flower fields and that kind of deal. But overall, it turned out really great. I really wanted to make sure I put a lot of trees on this layout. That was really important to me. Wanted kind of a classic look to the trains. And some people wanted to know why I did DCC on a basic figure 8. And that was so I could put other locomotives here, just even for appearance, right? Because I love, like, down in Snoqualmie, which is about, 30 minutes from here, they have a bunch of old trains just parked right in the community, and I love that as well. So I put this in so I could have a number of trains just sitting on the track. And you can see it like with the Santa Fe's. I've got those lit right now as well, and that kind of thing. So for my first layout, and probably will be my only layout, felt really, really good about it. This little corner over here reminds me of Snoqualmie Pass. I put a bunch of poplars in because this is very reminiscent of some of the gorge stuff down on the state line between Oregon and Washington. So everything had meaning for me, for sure. And it was fun to figure it out. Most of the foam kind of greenery, I went ahead and made that in a blender with different paints and just tried to figure out configuration. Most of the trees were just going to kind of a Ben Franklin and getting things. Some of them I made up. Some of the more pine trees were things I found for the cheap on Amazon. I just brought it all together. And so overall, feel real good about the layout. And took some time, especially with the lighting, but I really wanted to kind of nail that as much as I could, and was super pleased with it. So overall, pretty good stuff. Also, you'll notice here I put some switches in. This is the switch for the light on the Kato in scale. The three-way light switch isn't automatic, so I had to create a bypass. So just went ahead and did a manual bypass that way. And then also added a couple of switches here for this kind of side rail, and then also one back here for where the steam locomotive is. And so I can control that all right here as well. And then that's all powered actually by a Kato power pack underneath. So I actually have a regular old Kato transformer running all of that, and then the track is run on the DCC. So anyhow, like I said, felt really good about it within my town. I went ahead and printed the insides of different buildings like Mr. McGorium's Magic Emporium. I'm Scottish, and so I printed the inside of a Scottish pub that's in Scotland. Just different things, and I put it inside the buildings and then backlit all of that as well. So I am no expert by any stretch, but it just was a personal challenge I wanted to take. So I won't be eating up any more time. I know this isn't like the most professional kind of video for this kind of thing. My lighting isn't great in here right now because it's at night and that kind of thing. But, you know, I've been meaning to put this up for a little while since I finished the water. You can kind of see here, get a little bit better sense of kind of the ripples and that effect or whatever else. There at Diablo Lake, there's these islands, just solid rock islands out in the middle, so did that as well. And that was the thing I waited the longest for. I didn't do the pour for, like, much of this layout was done by spring. And I did not do the pour till a couple of weeks ago because I finally built up the courage to do it. So anyway, if you're doing that, just take it easy. You know, I had a few bubbles, but I was able to deal with them pretty quick and that kind of thing. And it wasn't nearly as terrible as I thought it was going to be. So overall, fun project. It was my COVID project. And now it is in my home library. I have kind of a big home library, as you can see. Not that you're really dialing in for that, but and I like classical planes, that kind of thing. Star Wars as well. Not here for that, here for the train. So there is my own little custom tribute to my childhood, Pacific Northwest, and all things I like. So all right, fellow trainers, have a good one. Here's a quick little night shot as well, because I figure if you're gonna have the lighting, maybe show it off a little bit. So anyway, if you've ever thought about doing it, make it happen. It's really a lot of fun. You'll enjoy it.